Welcome back to the Explanation Pro. Today I'll recap a sports historical drama film called The Match. Spoilers incoming. The movie starts as an old man named Branko accompanies his grandson to a football match. His grandson plays poorly during the match and the man explains that he's trying to do everything all by himself before suggesting that the boy try tennis instead. His grandson says that he loves football. Branko then tells him that his own father used to take him to games, which sparked his interest in the sport. He then tells his grandson a story that he apparently had never told anyone before. When Branko was a young boy, he used to help around his father's restaurant. During the new year, a group of men entered the restaurant and his father calls Branko before asking if the boy knew who the men were. Branko then says that one of the men was Laszlo and that all of them were part of the football team that beat the Nazis. His father then instructs him to serve them wine and to make sure that their glasses are always full. With a wine bottle in hand, he walks to the men's table and hands it to them. Laszlo states that Branko is too young to be serving alcohol, but the boy quickly defends that he's just serving it and not drinking. Laszlo's friend tells him to leave the table before Laszlo offers him a drink, but instead, Laszlo gives Branko a tip despite the child's protests. Laszlo then spots a woman that he becomes interested in and approaches her. He starts to flirt with her before his friend stops him and warns him that the Nazis are watching his every move. He sees one staring down at him from the balcony and Laszlo stares back. His friend then scolds him for testing their patience. The Nazi watching Laszlo earlier, Gruber, approaches him and eventually invites him to have a small wager with whoever keeps the ball in the air longer wins. Though Laszlo tries to evade it, Gruber calls the attention of everyone in the restaurant and asks whoever has a soccer ball. Branko then raises his hand. Laszlo's team eventually wins, much to the annoyance of Gruber. Laszlo continues to taunt Gruber, despite his friend trying to keep the peace. Gruber then proposes a toast to the Third Reich but Laszlo doesn't follow. Laszlo gets dragged out of the restaurant by his friend. They don't see Gruber signal to his men to follow them. The two men eventually get cornered by the Nazis outside. They beat up Laszlo's friend before taking Laszlo away. Branko witnesses everything and tries to tell his father that Laszlo's friend is on the streets, hurt, but his father continues to pull him away. Laszlo gets sent to the labor camp. Another prisoner named Andreas gets inside the bunker to call him outside, as the others have already lined up. Laszlo follows after him angrily and once they were outside, Andreas gets hit by the soldiers with their guns. There, a man introduces himself as Karoli and tells Laszlo that he played against him before. Karoli starts to compliment his football skills before ranting about how their country had been controlled by the Nazis and that they have been arresting everyone they see as a threat. Laszlo sarcastically says that they shouldn't complain because they're the privileged ones. Karoli shrugs that at least they're alive, but Laszlo says that they're being worked to death anyway. Annoyed, Karoli said that Laszlo shouldn't keep desisting because it might put everyone in danger and that their current situation is better than dying in the gas chambers. Karoli eventually gets annoyed at Laszlo and tells him that he would rather work to death than die at the gas chambers. He later groups with the other prisoners of the camp, Tibor and Jakub. Tibor mentions that the Nazis have grouped together in the east of Hungary. Karoli then quotes his father before saying that he was separated from his family when he was captured. He also gets angry remembering that no one helped them when they were being taken, insisting that it's being selfish. That night, the other prisoners introduce themselves to Laszlo. Despite the others' attempt to be civil with him, he stays cold and dismissive. Later on, a soldier arrives and throws some letters on the ground, which the prisoners pick up and read as those were letters from their families in other camps. Laszlo doesn't get any letters and simply watches as the other prisoners read theirs. The next morning, Gruber introduces Colonel Werns, who uses their camp as his headquarters. The guards count that one prisoner didn't line up and Gruber immediately recognizes that it's Laszlo. He then orders them to drag him out before he starts beating him in front of the colonel. The colonel recognizes Laszlo and asks him to be sent to his office. Despite the head guard's protests, the colonel insists on having a private meeting with the man. Once in his office, Franz tries to warn Laszlo that it's dangerous to keep taunting and fighting with the guards. He then threatens that he will get shot eventually if he keeps it up, but Laszlo scoffs and thinks that being killed that way makes the Nazis cowards. Franz ignores his stubbornness and says that he thought of an event for Adolf Hitler's birthday upon seeing Laszlo. The colonel plans to host a football match between the prisoners and the Nazis to celebrate. Laszlo tries to refuse, saying that the prisoners aren't in any condition to be able to play an exhibition match. Franz, however, doesn't take no for an answer and insists on it and threatens him if he tries to refuse further. That night, Laszlo tells the other prisoners about the planned exhibition match and they doubt the sincerity of the offer and the prisoners' ability to participate. Eventually, almost everyone agrees to play while Karolyi says that there should be some conditions so that the game is fair against the Nazis. Laszlo then says that he and Karolyi will talk to Franz about it, much to Karolyi's surprise. They approach the colonel about their conditions, but Franz says that he cannot do all of them, although says that he may be able to do minor adjustments related to some of them. Laszlo then says that if that's the case, then they can't play the game. He stands up and leaves while Karolyi follows him with hesitation. Once outside, Karolyi questions his sanity for turning his back on the colonel. A soldier calls for them to stop though Laszlo ignores it and continues to walk on. Eventually, the soldier shoots by their feet before Franz tells them that they're not finished talking. They go back to his office where he then agrees to their requests and allows them to recruit prisoners from other camps. They leave the colonel's office again and Karolyi asks him how he was so confident earlier. Laszlo then explains that Franz would be willing to do anything so the game goes on since it was Hitler's birthday and that another superior, General Ziga, was looking forward to the match. The two of them start recruiting in their own camp. Laszlo explains that whoever gets on the team would have a few privileges but he needs people that really know how to play. He then tests their skills while Karolyi lists their names down. The next morning, they start going to other camps to continue recruiting. A lot of people were eager to try out because of the privileges. In one of the camps, Laszlo spots a couple of dead prisoners strewn across the ground. He then recognizes one of them as his friend. He kneels down and mourns for him, slowly taking off his friend's armband. As he stands up, he sees a prisoner playing the violin for the commander and asks to meet him. The guard tells him that no one should disturb the commander during his violin lessons but Laszlo insists. He explains the upcoming match and that he's been recruiting prisoners to play for his team. The commander initially refuses, seeing that he knows that the young man with the violin doesn't play football. He eventually agrees, realizing that this would put the Nazi team at an advantage. Karolyi, Laszlo, and the new recruit start to leave before Laszlo sees the commander hit Branko for letting the geese out on the fields. Karolyi tries to stop Laszlo from interrupting but he approaches the commander and convinces him to hand over the boy. On the ride back to their camp, Karolyi says that the boy is the 14th member and they're only allowed 13 people to join them. Sure enough, Franz questions Branko's presence and demands him to be taken away. Laszlo then explains that the child will act as some sort of assistant to them. Franz then says that since they have the boy, they will have more energy to spare and bans them from meals for 2 days. He gives Laszlo a chance to go back on his decision but he insists. This causes the team members to get angry at Branko. Laszlo then tells them to direct their anger at the Nazis and not at the child. As they build their new training camp, he tells the team that they should remember how they were being abused by the Nazis and turn that into motivation to train harder and aim to win. General Ziga visits camp and Franz introduces him to the players, including one other professional player named Sandor. The general recognizes his surname and finds out that his wife is an opera singer. Franz later on calls for Sandor and gives him a letter from his wife as well as his release papers, which he signs. Sandor becomes more distracted and withdrawn after this. Laszlo and Karolyi notice so they try to ask him if he's alright. He explains his wife's letter and the offer of his release that Franz gave him. Laszlo warns him to not trust the Nazis but Sandor gets frustrated that they're not thinking like him and leaves. Eventually, Sandor wants to refuse the offer and tries to ask Gruber to let him talk to the colonel, but he just tells him to get back to work. That night, Sandor sneaks out and is seen by one of the team members. He then says that he just wants to see his wife and that he'll come back in the morning before he runs away. His wife has her performance at the opera house while General Ziga is seemingly enthralled by her. During her performance, Sandor tries to escape the camp to see her but he gets caught by the guards and is shot down. Laszlo argues with Franz about it. The colonel becomes angry and takes back all the privileges he gave them earlier as a punishment. With the loss of Sandor, the violin player is then forced to be a main player instead of being a substitute. They spend more time teaching him how to play scene as he's a novice at the sport. Laszlo also starts to form a plan on how to play against their opponents. He explains that they will first defend their goal before they wait for the ball to get in their position and start their counterattack. He also comes up with the codename, Franz, to signal their switch from defense to offense. On the night before the match, some of the prisoners doubt their chance of winning while some just want to survive after the match. On the way to the field, one of the team members compliments the violin player and asks what song he was playing. The violinist explains that it was a Jewish holiday song. Laszlo recognizes it as the song he was playing when he first saw the violinist. He realizes then that the man had been teaching the commander a Jewish song and is amused before telling him to keep on playing to cheer the team up. The team arrives and they are given fresh towels, soap, and uniforms. After taking a bath, they all gather around to prepare when Franz enters the room. He tells them that they don't have to wear their armbands as he doesn't want to make the game political. The match soon starts with the Hungarian team being overwhelmingly booed and the Nazi team being cheered. General Ziga notes that he's confident that their team will win but wants the Hungarians to play decently and put up a good show. The Nazis start the offense and they were harsh towards their opponents as they were eager to injure them. Despite having the ball for a long time, they fail to score a goal. Laszlo eventually gains possession of the ball and yells out the code word, so they all run towards the opponent's goal. The Hungarians manage to score. Franz approaches the Hungarian team during the break and makes a deal with Laszlo that if they intentionally lose, he will grant the freedom of everyone in the team except Laszlo. Laszlo shares the deal with the team and lets them decide if they want to take it or not. As they leave, Laszlo tells Branko to hide once the timer is nearly over if the Hungarian team is winning. Though confused about why, Branko promises to do so. The game continues and the Nazis manage to score, tying the scores between the two teams. However, Laszlo easily scores another goal and puts them at the advantage again. Branko then sees this and leaves to follow Laszlo's instructions. He eventually gets out and peeks at the field one more time, watching until the end of the match with the Hungarians winning the game. Branko then goes back into hiding as his team celebrates. Back in his hiding spot, he hears gunshots before a soldier enters the locker room, though Branko doesn't get caught. His grandson asks him what happens. Branko then remembers how he walked out to the field and saw the corpses of the team members. The young Branko looks horrified and runs away from the field while the present Branko narrates how the team was killed for winning. The movie ends as Branko tells his grandson that it's getting late before the two of them start to walk home. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. See you in the next video.